Hi, and welcome to Morton Brown Family Wealth's Intentional Wealth Update. I am Katie Brown, and I am happy to have Cody Demmel here with me today. How are you, Cody?
Good, how are you?
Good. On this update, we want to revisit philanthropy and charitable giving. This is something that we love to talk about, but it's also something that we are getting more and more inquiries from our clients about in ways that they can give efficiently, they can support the causes that are important to them and meaningful to them and their families, and a way for them to express their values. We thought we'd revisit the conversation. We just wanted to highlight a few items as far as where we stand in the world of philanthropy as a nation and how things are migrating. Fidelity Charitable put out a report recently. It really was geared more toward advisors. It wasn't as much consumer facing, but there were a number of nuggets in there that we thought were valuable to pull forward.
Yeah, it was more focused to advisors to help make sure that you advise your clients of all the different ways that they can help their charities, or just make sure that they can pass some of the inheritance to their kids as beneficial as possible. I thought one of the most important things from the article was just how the charitable giving keeps increasing year over year. I think this study, the last year they were looking at was back in 2020, but it was a record year for charitable giving, and it was close to $500 billion. I think they said it was 470 billion that was donated to charities in 2020.
Yeah. And interesting too, because they specifically said 78% of those gifts were given by individuals and bequests. So it's
Yep.
not necessarily the large corporations or large foundations out there providing a lot of those gifts. Like, those are individuals saying, I want to contribute to something, I want to make a difference, and I want to share that with people closest to me and so forth, and kind of build it into the plan. And you're right, the number increases on a year over year basis. And it's interesting to look at it historically. There was a graph that was provided as well, and you can see during periods of growing economies versus periods of recession, charitable giving really doesn't shift that much. I've read other reports that they didn't highlight it specifically in this one, but I've read other ones that charitable giving typically floats right around about 2% of GDP. So that number is expanding. But something else that really caught my eye in this report is there are a lot of people that are giving more, but they're not necessarily talking to their advisors about it. Like, there's the desire to give, but they're figuring out how to do it on their own, which is awesome. But there's a lot of value that we can bring forward.
I think that's an important point. We as advisors obviously have the breakdown of all your assets, your income, your expenses, and we can talk through what's the best asset to give, whether it's cash or maybe you have appreciated stock inside of a joint account, and talking through what makes the most sense in the most tax efficient way.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the major shifts that is happening in the landscape, is that level of giving floating around the 2% of GDP has remained fairly constant, although the numbers get bigger and bigger. But the way that gifts are showing up, there are more and more gifts coming from non-cash assets. So they could be things like investments, they could be, hard assets, real estate, and different vehicles that are being used. I mean, the boom of donor advised funds has been dramatic. One of the highlights they put in there is 2016, there were somewhere around 200,000 or so donor advised funds across the country. And now there's over 1 million. And that's just in 6 years, 7 years. And we're seeing that as well. I think every year we're opening up a couple more and more donor advised funds for our clients. Cody, do you want to share a little bit about donor advised funds and sort of the mechanics of them in case anybody's curious?
Yeah. So I guess on a high level, to try to make it as basic as possible, say you set up a donor advised fund and you appreciate, say, gifted stock into that donor advised fund. When you gift that appreciated stock, you don't have to pay the potential capital gains that you would if you were to sell it and then move the cash into a charity that you want to support. Say, for an example, just again to make it as basic as possible, you transfer around 100,000 of appreciated stock that you have inside of a taxable account. You then, after you have that donor advised fund open, get to make the decisions on what charities it's going to support, how often it does it, whether it's on a yearly basis, over multiple years. So you have control of what charities you're going to support and how they do that.
Yes. Yeah. It gives you the ability to kind of sprinkle along the way too. And it's
Yeah.
a little more flexible than like a personal foundation, for instance. So if like foundations have a minimum 5% that have to be distributed each year, donor advised funds don't have that restriction, although that is the intention of the vehicle for those gifts to be then gifted out. But one of the things I love about donor advised funds too is that they can be a great generational vehicle, and they can start to open up that legacy conversation for children, grandchildren. We have many clients, and I'm going to say my family personally, where we have a donor advised fund, and it's an opportunity for us to bring our kids into the conversation to say, okay, what do we want to support and how do we want to do it? It's a way to start that money management conversation or to start to talk about legacy, because that can be difficult for a number of families. So there's a lot of great uses for the fund and other strategies when it comes to giving from IRAs. That's been a big topic because we've had some changes when it comes to those qualified charitable distributions, those QCDs. And so that's another great opportunity if we want to go in that direction.
There is potentially giving 50,000 per person from your IRA into a charity annuity, and say you give that 50,000 into an annuity at one of the charities you want to support. They pay you out a monthly income stream. I think it said the minimum had to be around 5%, but with the increase in interest rates, most of the payouts are around 8%. So say for an example, you donate 50,000, that's the maximum you can from your individual IRA to a charity annuity. They will pay you around 8% a year in income going forward for the rest of your life. And that way you can potentially reduce your required minimum distributions from your overall, traditional IRA accounts that you have open, while obviously supporting the charity you want to support.
Yeah. And for people that aren't too familiar with those gift annuities, as you said, you can gift that money to a charity, and then the charity will pay that income stream back to you. Not all charities have the mechanics set up to do that. Well, I think it's an awesome opportunity. You still want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence, because then at that point, that income stream really is dependent on, the financial stability of the charity as well. So to bear that in mind and make sure that they have the pipeline in place for that to run smoothly. But I believe that ability to gift that $50,000 from your IRA, I think that was one of the new changes in the Secure Act 2.0 that came out. But the QCDs, those qualified charitable distributions, those have been around for a while now from the IRAs, which we've been actively asking, once again, our clients who do need to take requirement distributions, is there an organization that you support, or multiple ones, or do you typically do year-end charitable giving? Let's consider using the IRA assets as opposed to just writing a check, because then that never comes to them as taxable. That distribution is not taxable income to them. How about the wealth transfer? I should say there are tons of articles talking about the great wealth transfer, but something that we follow and stay on top of how things are trending and how maybe some of the mindsets, I think, are shifting amongst the different generations.
Okay, I mean, the great wealth transfer has been in the news all the time for the last couple of years. So as baby boomers age, just potentially what the wealth transfer will be to obviously their beneficiaries, whether that's a charity, their kids, any other institution that they want to support. What I found fascinating in that article is it was estimating the total household assets inside of the U.S. as right around $140 trillion. And what stood out to me was around 84 trillion of that is in the baby boomers. The article says the greatest wealth transfer ever.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing elements of that transfer already occurring. That's been one of the more predominant shifts in how legacy wealth has been transferring. It used to be traditionally the inheritance via bequests in the will or through trusts. We are seeing more and more of that wealth transfer kind of trickling in sooner rather than later. So parents helping to a greater degree with a down payment on a home, or helping to pay for college for grandchildren, or even just doing larger, really taking advantage of some of the really high tax exemptions that we have in place right now of nearly 13 million per individual, and starting to do large gifts sooner rather than later but having the ability to access portions of those large gifts to help support a certain lifestyle. So I think it's fascinating that there's still the majority of the wealth there in the baby boomers, but we're seeing shifts come down to Gen X, and millennials are really positioned for a significant increase in wealth down the road. I think some of these assets may almost start to skip over some of the Gen X and go right to the millennials, if we think about it generationally.
Yep. I think it's important to bring that up too, kind of as you were talking about, prior, maybe the standard was it would go to somebody on their passing. But now if you're able to, whether it's the annual gift tax, or if you go above that to potentially lower your estate tax at the end of the time, you can potentially let those assets grow whenever you gift them till the actual person is going to use those assets. So potentially you're getting that growth rate. The beneficiaries, getting the benefit of that now compared to it just growing in your estate.
And like I said, I feel like charitable giving is a really great conduit to start to open that conversation for generational wealth, because it's not always a comfortable conversation, but oftentimes families can find a common ground there, and they can start to, if there are concerns about the management of the money with the next generation, once again, like a donor advised fund, something that you're kind of managing together and you have a common goal, is a really great way to start seeing what that process might look like when it comes to bigger dollars or when it comes to wealth shifting within the families. So if any of these conversations are interesting to any of the viewers out there, this is stuff we talk about all the time. This is stuff we really enjoy learning about and sharing and bringing some of our experiences forward. So we definitely welcome any follow-up one-to-one conversations. We'd love this.
If charitable giving is, a goal of yours and you want to talk through the best ways to do that and benefit the charity, but also potentially benefiting yourself, as Katie was saying, we're always open to these conversations, and we could go a lot longer, but obviously we want to not try to take up too much time in this video. So.
Well, until next time, thank you for tuning in. And if you do want to reach out, you can feel free to find us at mortonbrownfw.com.